I am 68 years old, which is to say, I buy oatmeal in the big round cardboard can, the one with a smiling man in a hat and a sodium count that seems reasonable. I live alone in a bungalow with a sloping porch on Maple and 3rd, the one with a lamppost that blinks at odd intervals, like it's thinking something over. My wife, Marion, died in November 2021 on a Thursday, for 22 p.m. at St. Anne's. My daughter Ruth stopped speaking to me 2 months after the funeral when I told her I wouldn't sign a loan for her then-fiancé's landscaping business. He used to leave grass clippings in the street, like confetti after a parade no one attended. The kettle on my stove is an old Farberware with a black plastic handle and a hard water halo that even vinegar can't negotiate. The toaster is a 2-slice Hamilton Beach from Walmart, $19.88 on sale. The sort that ejects English muffins like it resents breakfast. I eat at the end of my small oak table where Marion once kept a blue glass sugar bowl. Now it's a place for my Lenovo ThinkPad Model T for $80, with a sticker that says, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. I wasn't always a man of ledgers. But grief is a great clerical worker. It files. It stamps. It underlines. I met Pastor Joel at Ruth's church, a renovated gym with a hazy laser projector and folding chairs that pinch the backs of your thighs. It was January 15th, 2023, 10:06 a.m. According to the church app, one was asked to download. Relevant. Neon arrow logo. He shook my hand and held it like he was checking cantaloupe. He was clean, expensively clean, with sleeves rolled, just so, a pale gray suit that probably had a name like Dove, and teeth that had never seen a second-hand dentist. Brother Thomas, he said, using the voice menus when they want to borrow tools. I heard about you, Marion. We're praying. He didn't know her name. Not really. He knew it like he knew my first and last 4 of a debit card were somewhere between a hallelujah and the closing him. I am not cruel. It is not a hobby with me. But I have learned to listen to the tones of words. His had a price tag swinging from the end. The first time he said donation, he did it like a magician pulling scarves. If you feel led to sow a seed, that's how he said it, on February 5th. Seed. The word dropped into the church like a coin in a jar. That morning, Ruth slipped her hand through my arm, tugged me toward the kiosk by the welcome desk. It's easy, she said. They've got Zelle and a QR code. What is it for? I asked. For God, she said, a little too bright, like someone selling a blender on TV. They had a donation tiered page on an iPad. $100 faithful, $250 builder, $500 visionary, and a field where you could write whatever you wanted. They had slick icons, a smiling child, a shovel breaking ground, a microphone. I gave $100. I am not a monster. I spent $3.49 on a cinnamon roll at the cafe, too. The frosting crusted at the edge like ice on a January window. 3 days later, I got a text. It was Ruth 9:17 p.m., 3 lightning bolt emojis. Pastor says we're close to the down payment for the new building. He's asking a few of the faithful to step up in faith, like serious faith. How serious? I typed. I'm doing $2,500, she wrote, and then, as if to reassure me, over 2 months. Where does a paralegal with a 2019 Kia Soul do $2,500 over 2 months? I called and got her voicemail. If I don't call back, it's because I'm thriving. I sent $200 more to the church instead, a peace offering, and wrote in memory of Marion in the memo line because the app asked for one and because grief has a need to put its old name in new places. On March 12th, Pastor took it up a notch. Some of you have been holding back, he said, pacing the stage. Microphone near his mouth like a lover's finger. That's okay. Fear is a liar. God says to test him, and see if he won't open the windows of heaven. I have tested things. Dish sponges, smoke detectors, my own patience. Heaven was not in the habit of sending me statements with routing numbers. After service, a man with a beard arranged like topiary guided me to a small office with a Bluetooth speaker playing instrumental pop, the kind that makes everything sound like a dentist appointment. Pastor Joel sat behind a desk that looked like a runway for coffee cups. He slid a brochure toward me. Legacy Givers. Sounds like an insurance product, I said. He laughed. Kingdom product, Brother Thomas. The brochure featured a photo of a woman on a beach, arms wide. The word overflow in a font that had paid for private school. The giving levels did not bother with small bills. $10,000 foundation, $25,000 pillar, $50,000 cornerstone. For $100,000, they called you something in Greek and invited you to a dinner with select leaders. So what does a pillar get? I asked. Favor, he said. And access to vision. Itemized receipts? I asked. He blinked. The Bluetooth speaker whispered Ed Sheeran into the air. Of course we send a charitable acknowledgement, he said. For tax purposes. Itemize, I said. Per line item. Funds in, funds out. Project codes. Vendor names. Dates. Receipts. He smiled. The way men smile at puppies stepping on glass. We operate in faith, Thomas. I operate in QuickBooks, I said. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. My home smells faintly of coffee and Murphy oil soap. On the kitchen counter, a notepad with tomatoes on the border lists the banal and the necessary. Milk, bananas, WD-40. On the refrigerator, an ancient magnet from Pinto's hardware grips the plumber's phone number like a dog with a sock. My mornings are quietly calibrated. Kettle at 7:10. Shower by 7:30. News at 8:00 sound low. Walk at 8:15 in a gray windbreaker. The zipper missing a tooth. By March's end, I had documents. I had a concert of documents. The bank sent PDFs with green check marks. My credit union reimbursed a fraudulent Hulu charge in 2019 and I had kept the letter. It pleased me. I made a folder on my desktop, church, then subfolders, texts, statements, receipts, photos. I date stamped 2023-03-28_Ruth_2500.png, 2023-04-02_MitoNation_500_SA.pdf. I had a page from the church thanking me for my generosity. It was a standard 501c3 acknowledgement, boilerplate, unsubstantial, a receipt the way a cloud is a building. It said nothing about where. It said nothing about how. It sat beside my toaster like it had a right to be there. On April 9th, Easter Sunday, Ruth told me she had done something big. Elaborate eyelashes trembled. I put down a faith deposit, Dad, she said, and kissed my cheek like it was an apology. How big? I asked, watching steam lift from her paper cup, like a spirit reluctant to leave. 30,000, she said. The number landed and rolled around my head like a marble in a drawer. Pastor Joel says we're in a season of acceleration. Acceleration toward what? I asked. I do sarcasm. I do it slowly. I let it sit and thicken. She drew the outline of a heart on a napkin and then shaded it in. The building, she said. Imagine, Dad, a real sanctuary, a place to honor Mom. She said it with the certainty of youth, that unfounded optimism that made the 2008 housing market a menagerie. I did not remind her that Marion had honored God by planting petunias by the mailbox and sending $50 checks to St. Anne's Auxiliary twice a year. Marion did not believe in fog machines. I asked for Ruth's acknowledgement letter. She said it would arrive. It did not arrive. May began with allergies and a letter from a credit card company I do not like because their envelopes look like overdue notices even when they are not. Pastor Joel called 5:41 p.m. as I was sliding chicken thighs into a Pyrex pan salt and pepper, a pinch of smoked paprika. One of life's small mercies. Brother Thomas, he said, can we count on you for something bolder? How bold? I said, fishing a lemon from the crisper like a prize. We're inviting a handful of legacy givers to see the down payment, he said. We need to show the bank $500,000 in liquid commitments by June 1st. I feel led to ask you to believe God for $50,000. I believe God for receipts, I said, zesting the lemon with punitive detail. Itemized. He exhaled a pastoral sigh. We can do an acknowledgement for the full amount, not a church letter, I said. Receipts, vendor invoices, escrow statements, a ledger. You're dealing with a man who writes down his thermostat settings. Do you have a lack mindset? He asked gently. Do you have a ledger? I asked not gently at all. He pivoted, like good speakers do when a microphone squeals. Maybe Ruth and I can talk to you together, he said. She's all in. I ended the call and put the chicken in at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 minutes, turning the pan halfway through because my oven runs hot on the left. Power is not subtle. It burns where it wants. On May 7th after service, a woman with a clipboard and shoes worth my month of utilities asked me to initial 3 lines. "Just confirming your pledge," she said. I did not initial anything. I did, however, go home and pull out the accordion folder where I keep my will, my insurance, Marion's death certificate. A man can live poor and die clean. He can also live clean and die poor. The trick is to know which you prefer. That evening I called Ruth. "I want to see what you've given," I said. "I gave from my heart," she said. "Don't start." "From what account?" I asked. "What routing number? What date? What memo? For my heart is not a bank." She cried. I listened. I am not proud of my silence. I am only telling you what happened. By May 19th, Ruth had Venmoed $2,750 more. I saw the public feed. She had used the little church emoji, a white building with a cross and a sun like an egg yolk behind it. Her boyfriend, now absent, had once sent her a pizza slice emoji for rent. When I think of the modern economy, I think of cartoons try pay a light bill, itemized receipts. I said at the microphone on a Sunday I did not plan to speak. It was May 28, 11:33 a.m. The service had been loud. A fog machine had made the stage look like the old train tracks in November. People had cried. I had not. My grief does not need theatrics. It knows its lines. I stood in the aisle and raised my hand, and Pastor Joel, to his credit, did not pretend not to see me. "Brother Thomas," he said, as if I were about to recite a psalm. I walked to the front. I wore my good jacket, the one with elbow patches, the one Marion had said made me look like a librarian who solved mysteries. I held a folder. It was labeled receipts, block letters sharply. "I have given to this church," I said, voice steady. "My daughter has given to this church. We have requested an accounting itemized for the funds collected for the building campaign." A woman in the third row emmemed like a judge with a stamp in her hand. I was polite. I am often polite, right up to the moment I am not. "We have received acknowledgement letters," I said, but no breakdown, no identification of the escrow account, no confirmation of the down payment held in trust, no copies of vendor bids for construction, no signed contract with a general contractor, no permit number from the city, no bank letter verifying the funds on deposit. The room shifted. You can hear a congregation breathe when it remembers it has lungs. Pastor Joel smiled the way you'd smile at a toddler fisting peas. "We walk by faith, Brother Thomas." I opened the folder and held up a printed bank transfer. On April 9th, $30,000 left my daughter's account at Citizens Bank, routing 0931, account ending 2284, to relevant church building fund, a DBA I cannot find in the state registry. On May 11th, $500 left mine by ACH, memo cornerstone. She wants line items, dates, vendors, account where the money now resides. I want itemized receipts. He took the microphone from his mouth. For a moment, naked sound. Then, "We will not be bullied," he said. "Then be audited," I said, and handed the microphone back to the man in a dove suit. Someone clapped. It startled me. Then someone else. The room was not a riot. It was a question mark with hands. I went home and made a sandwich with the last of the turkey. 2 slices of wheat bread, too dry at the corners. Mustard that had started to grow bitter. I ate at the sink. You can stand there and pretend to wash your hands, and really you are just bracing yourself on the edge of your own life. On June 2nd, I received an email from Finance at Relevant with a PDF attached. Building campaign overview. It was 2 pages, full color, arrows, circles, a photo of a shovel, the word breakthrough embedded like a watermark under a fist raised toward heaven. It listed totals. Funds raised, $464,200. It did not list where the funds were held. It did not list an escrow. It did not list a contractor. It did not list any numbers I could actually test. I wrote back, "Itemized receipts," I typed, and attached a photo of my old calculator. A Casio with a missing 7 cap that still registered 7s, just fine if you pressed on the right spot. On June 5th, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Rivera, neat gray suit, practical flats that did not squeak. We sat in a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon and recirculated air. "I'd like to demand an accounting," I said. "Are you a member?" she asked. "Not in the way that matters," I said. She was good. She was thorough. She explained the law of charitable organizations in our state, the filing requirements for 501c3s, the distinction between designated and restricted funds. If the solicitation specify building fund, she said, tapping the brochure with a silver pen, they are on the hook to use it for that purpose, or to post notice of any change of purpose, or to return the funds upon request, especially if donors were induced by specific representations. Induced, I said. I like precise words. They sit up straight. We crafted a letter. June 12th, certified mail. Return receipt requested. We asked for 1 bank statements for any account designated building fund from January 1st to June 1st. 2 copies of all vendor bids received. 3 copies of any signed agreements with general contractors. For proof of funds on deposit for down payment. 5. Any correspondence with the city regarding permit. 6. The name of the licensed CPA who performs annual reviews. 30 days, we wrote. As if 30 days were a thing you could hold like a fish. Ruth called me that night. Why are you doing this? She asked, voice small in the empty hallway of her apartment. Because if it's honest, I said, then receipts will set it free. That's not the verse, Dad. It is my verse, I said. They sent me a spreadsheet. It was labeled Budget Overview, and the cells were colored like a pastel nursery. It showed projected drywall and projected HVAC and anticipated AV, and faith gifts expected. It was not an accounting of funds raised or spent. It was a dream board with numbers. It had a footnote, pending confirmation of Kingdom Partners. I printed it and used it as a coaster under my coffee mug. Because life is short, on June 28th, an email. We are delighted to invite you to a special dinner for cornerstones and above. Saturday, July 8, 6:30 p.m. The Maple Room, linen napkins, an RSVP link. I RSVP'd yes, with a note. I will be bringing documents. I did bring documents. In a neat Samsonite folder, black, zipped, bank transfer confirmations, screenshots of Zelle and Venmo, the building brochure, the pastel spreadsheet, the certified letter, and the signed green card from the receipt, checkmarked by someone with a tired wrist. The Maple Room wore its chandeliers like jewelry. Round tables, seating chart, place cards. Mine said Mr. Thomas Ellison. At the head table, Pastor Joel and his wife, a woman with hair that had taken time and money to become what it was. Plates of slow-roasted beef arrived, little towers of mashed potatoes piped like icing, a sprig of rosemary as if we were edible. We were given a slideshow, rendering stucco, a glassware shaped like ambition. We are $35,800 away from our goal tonight, Pastor Joel said, eyes bright, voice confiding. If 10 of you would sow $3,580, we crossed the finish line. I stood. Ruth tugged my sleeve. Dad, please, she said. I think she thought I was going to donate. I think the room did too. I clicked the carabiner on my folder, the only flourish I allowed myself, and walked to the little stage. I have brought my seed, I said, and held up the bank statements. It is made of paper. A laugh, awkward, a few notes too loud, like someone dropped a dish in a kitchen and tried to pretend it was a dance step. Brother Thomas, Pastor began. Pastor, I said, June 12th letter, 30 days. It has been 16. I have received a spreadsheet that lists dreams as if they were drywall. I have asked for the name of your CPA and received a first name in response, Fred. I have checked the state registry for relevant church building fund as a DBA and found nothing. I have searched permit applications with the city and found a pending request for occupancy at a warehouse on Dunbar, unrelated to a sanctuary. I have reviewed Ruth's $30,000 transfer to relevant church, without designation in your bank statement, and your acknowledgement letter that fails to designate. I am asking again, where is the money? And may I please have itemized receipts? There are rooms that turn on you like a dog. This one did not. It adjusted itself around me. A chair scooted back, a fork placed down, a breath held. People know hunger. They know wolves when one walks across the banquet. Pastor Joel smiled like a photograph. We will not allow the enemy to sow strife, he said. Then sow transparency, I said. And because I am old and tired and plain, I added, or I will sow subpoenas. On July 14th, an envelope arrived by USPS, cream, heavy, the kind that pretends to be important. Inside, a letter on letterhead and 3 pages of what looked like an accounting. It was a list of donations by last name, initial dates, amounts, no account numbers, no bank references, and at the top a line that read total received, $516,004.23. The decimals impressed me. The details did not. There were 2 line items: expenses, AV, install projected, and architect deposit, with round numbers that felt like someone made them up over coffee. The rest simply read, transfer to general fund temporary. I pressed my thumb against that phrase until the paper softened. I drank coffee and did not put the mug down on the spreadsheet because I wanted to see the ink later when I testified. Rivera drafted another letter. Demand for correction. It said, we cited state law. We threatened to contact the Attorney General's Charitable Trust Section. We CC'd the AG anyway, because my patience had a clock and its hand were large. On July 24th, I drove to the church office. I wore a tie. A tie is a mood. The office manager did not look up from her screen for a moment too long. I'm here to see Pastor, I said. And Fred? Fred, she asked. The CPA, I said. Her eyes did a small thing, and then they stopped doing it. He's not in. I'll wait, I said, and sat down on the gray sofa with cushions so firm they felt punitive. A television on the wall looped clips of baptisms, water pouring, people rising, the camera catching them at a flattering angle. Pastor emerged 20 minutes later. He smelled like the men's counter at Macy's in December. We went into a side room with a little table, 2 chairs, and a wall decal that said, Faith over fear, written in a font that had never met a ledger. We are working on it, he said. I have filed, I said. He understood. Words have timbers. He heard the wood. Brother Thomas, this is a spiritual attack. This is a financial audit, I said. Do you want to destroy what God is building? I want to know if God is building it, I said, or if you are building a car payment. He leaned back and laughed. Laughter can be generous. His was not. The first call came August 3, 9:12, an investigator from the AG's office. We'll call her P. Asked polite, pointed questions, and then asked me to email everything. I have a folder labeled everything. I sent it. She called Ruth too, who cried and apologized and asked if she was in trouble. P told her she was a victim, not a suspect, and asked for her bank statements. Ruth cried again. Then she forwarded everything to me anyway, because she knows me and my need to number things when the world will not. On August 18th, a registered letter went to the church. Civil investigative demand. It was thick. I imagined the envelope in Pastor's hands, heavy as a confession. On August 27th, a special service asked for a fasting offering. A man on stage said, we're under attack. He met me. Meanwhile, I lived my life. I bought tomatoes at the farmer's market, $3.99 a pound, which is too much for tomatoes in August. I replaced the bulb on the porch lamp, which blinked less, but still thought things over. I canned peaches with the sticky joy of a man who knows winter always comes, and sometimes it is good to line your shelves with sweet things. Ruth came over on September 2nd with a casserole that tasted like 1994. I thought we could watch something, she said. We watched a documentary about a man who had hoarded money in coffee cans. We ate on the couch, plates on our laps, the air too cold because I had misjudged the thermostat by 1 notch and had to commit to the bit. She said, I'm sorry. And I said, do not apologize for believing people. And she cried softly into the lap blanket Marion had knitted in a color that could only be called lake. September 10, 10:02 a.m. service. The music was loud enough to make my bones consider unionizing. During the announcements, a man in a navy suit came down the center aisle with an envelope in his hand. He did not walk like a congregant. He walked like a man with a job. He stood near the front row and waited until the song ended, and then, in that sliver of silence before clapping, he said, Is Pastor Joel here? Pastor lifted his hand, confused, as if claiming a package from UPS. The man approached with brisk sympathy, like a nurse taking a pulse. He handed over the envelope, nodded, and turned. The room felt like wind right before it breaks into rain. Pastor opened it, saw what it was, and smiled as if it were a birthday card. He said into the microphone, laughter rehearsed and easy, Well, looks like someone wants to bless us with a little paperwork. The room laughed because rooms do what microphones tell them to. He tucked the envelope under his Bible. The man had stopped at my row earlier and slid a copy into my hand too. Complainant, it read, printed neatly under my name. I did not smile. I did not clap. I did not even breathe, I think, for a full 2 seconds. The next day, September 11th, the church posted a video, standing firm against accusations. He said, the word Jezebel. He said, spirit of division. He did not say itemized receipts. On September 20th, we had a meeting at the AG's office. Pastor brought a lawyer in a blue suit that wanted to be Navy when it grew up. He brought a bookkeeper named Fred. Not really, but that's what I had decided to call him. Fred wore a shirt with a pocket protecting a pen that did not need to be protected. He had printed reports. They were clean numbered, tabbed. They were also missing things, like backups, like bank statements with actual account numbers, like checks copied front and back. I wrote questions in my notebook, narrow rule, the kind school children use until their hands learn better posture. Rivera asked crisp, surgical questions. P asked slower ones that drew out more than they logically should have, like pulling ribbon out of a box. Pastor answered in paragraphs. Fred answered in approximations. At last, I asked one question. To what account were the temporary transfers made? Fred said, operating. And the operating account funds, are they used for payroll? Yes, he said. And did any portion of designated building funds, once transferred to operating, go to payroll that included pastoral compensation? He looked at Pastor, then the lawyer, then the wall where a potted plant reenacted a modest success story. We had to cover cash flow, he said, and then mustered something defiant. It is all the Lord's anyway. It is the donors until it is the purposes, Rivera said, and may God bless the legal mind when it is not for sale. October settled on the city like a thoughtful cat. Leaves on Maple Street became brittle coins, useless and everywhere. On October 12th, the church announced it was restructuring. On October 19th, the statement said, in light of recent distractions, we will be postponing our building initiative. On October 25th, another statement. Those who wish to redirect their gifts may contact finance at relevant. They did not say refund. They said redirect. Words matter. I wrote a letter. Return, I wrote. Restitution. On November 3rd, Ruth received a cashier's check for $27,000. The memo line said nothing, as if money was as silent as it felt in the hand. On November 7th, I received a check for $500. The envelope included a letter signed by Pastor Joel. We regret any confusion. I pinned it to my corkboard and beside it tacked the AG's interim report, redacted, language cool as crystal. Findings to date suggest misuse of restricted funds. The church did not close. They never do. They molt. They rebrand. They find a warehouse that used to sell tires and put a drum set where the alignment machine was. But something in the room had changed. I saw it in the way the ushers watched the buckets pass, like they were escorting a drunk friend home. On December 15th, I attended a luncheon at St. Anne's, the auxiliary Marion had loved. Coffee too hot for paper cups. Sandwiches cut diagonally because triangles make ordinary food feel intentional. An older woman with a sweater that had known good days tapped her fork against a glass. We have an announcement, she said. A donor has made a gift to upgrade the family waiting room in memory of his wife. It was not a big number in the grand obnoxiousness of the world. $18,400. Enough to make the chairs less punitive, the lamps less grim, the paint less beige. Enough to frame 3 photos of the river and place them evenly along the far wall. So when you looked up from your grief, you saw something that reminded you life moved, that water obeyed gravity and kept going. After a nurse took my hand and squeezed it the way people do, who have watched people die and seen the living stay and tidy up. Marion would have liked this, she said. She would have corrected the grammar in the plaque, I said, and we laughed, the brittle nice kind. Then she leaned in and said, I heard about the church. People always hear, I said. She nodded. Thank you, she said, for asking for receipts. Faith also keeps receipts, I said. They're called memories. Ruth and I put up the tree on December 22nd. A small one, pre-lit. The wire's always wrong the first time and right the second if you're patient. I made hot chocolate with too much cocoa and not enough sugar because I am still learning recipes that Marion knew with her eyes. Ruth handed me the ornament for 1986, the one with my name badly painted and the year waving at me like a flag from a slow parade. "I'm sorry," she said again under the low glow. "For what?" I asked. "For taking you there. For believing him. You don't need to apologize for what your heart wants," I said. "Just make it show you the receipts next time." She laughed. It sounded like a door I'd closed opening of its own accord. January 5th, 2024. The AG's office issued a consent agreement. It required the church to restore restricted funds, to implement enhanced financial controls, to undergo annual independent review by a CPA firm, and to provide donors with accountings upon request. There was a small fine, the cost of 2 fog machines. There was a set of deadlines. There was a signature. Pastor Joel's name looked like a confident river until you followed it to the end where it hesitated. People called me. Some thanked me. Some told me I had touched the Lord's anointed, which sounds like a misdemeanor. I did not gloat. Age removed some appetites. I did, however, take a photograph of the agreement and place it under the magnet from Pinto's Hardware. Now, when I reached for the plumber's number, I could touch accountability with my thumb. On January 12th, I received an envelope with a check for $1,900. Correction of donor designation. The letter said. I deposited it, printed the receipt, and stapled it to the first letter, so they would be husband and wife in my files. I still go to church. Not that one. Not any of the ones with a drum cage that looks like a terrarium for loud things. I go to a small sanctuary with a piano slightly out of tune and a pastor who wears a jacket bought to be worn, not photographed. He passes an offering plate with an apology that feels like integrity. I put in what I can. I write undesignated on the envelope and trust my own follow-up. Ruth comes with me sometimes. We sit in the 4th pew on the left because Marion preferred that angle. She said it made the stained glass look like a kindness. We go to breakfast after. Eggs over medium. Rye toast, strawberry jam, and little foils you have to corner with a thumbnail to open. We talk about the small news of our lives. The price of gas. The neighbor's cat that stalks squirrels as if it has read a manual. The way the porch light finally stopped blinking after I replaced the old photocell in October. I keep my folder labeled receipts. It lives in the drawer where Marion kept napkins embroidered with lemons. We only brought out when company came. Sometimes I open it and run a hand over the edges of the paper. It is not the paper I love. It is the proof. Pastor Joel preached, I am told, on perseverance the Sunday after the consent agreement. He talked about trials. He talked about wolves. He did not talk about decimals. A friend sent me a clip. I watched without sound. The captions coughing up words like season and breakthrough. And then I closed it and opened a photo of Marion holding a watering can on a day when the sky decided to forgive everyone. I have learned to measure my days in cups of coffee and phone calls returned and receipts folded just so. I have learned that the people who say don't make it about money are often making it about money. I have learned that a man can be a believer and an auditor, a widower and a watchdog, a father and a ledger. None of these are contradictions. They are parts of the same stubborn. The kettle whistles. I lift it off the heat and pour. The mug is chipped. The crack glazed over like the past. Visible proof that something happened, and yet it holds. Steam rises and then becomes air and then becomes nothing you can point at and name. I sip. Outside, on maple. The lamppost burns steady as if it had never blinked, as if someone finally remembered to set its sensor to the thing it had wanted all along. Daylight. I take a pen and write across the top of a fresh sheet and a folder. Date, amount, memo. It looks like a prayer if you squint. And that is enough. That is itemized. That is faith. I close the folder. I turn off the porch light. I sleep. In the morning I will wake, make oatmeal, and take what is owed in full.